What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. It had been years since Robert's rebellion came to an end. Aerys II Targaryen was dead, slain by his own Kingsguard Sir Jaime Lannister of House Lannister. His son Rhaegar Targaryen was also dead, slain at the Trident by Robert himself with his warhammer to the man's skull. Soon after, Robert proclaimed himself King of Westeros and the Seven Kingdoms. All with the backing of House Stark, Tully, Aeron of the Vale, and of course House Lannister after the battle at the Trident was won to enforce his position. Still, not all were happy with this new king sitting on the Iron Throne. Namely the Iron Islands led by Balon Greyjoy of House Greyjoy 9 years following Robert sitting on the throne. Many claim it was the vast numbers that brought the Greyjoys down. One house versus the entire might of the Iron Throne. But that wasn't the case. It wasn't just one house versus the Iron Throne. It was one house versus the might of the Iron Throne and one infamous, demon sage, who was crucial during Robert's rebellion. When Robert had summoned the might of his throne into war to combat the Greyjoys, Ned had sought out Naruto to ask him one more time to help put down this unprovoked attack on the Seven Kingdoms. Of course this time around, Ned wasn't as welcome in Naruto's house like the first time, and for good reason. Naruto had fought for Robert during Robert's rebellion, getting some odd looks from the future king, and the armies in question when they saw him dressed like Obito had been when facing the Shinobi Alliance during the Fourth Shinobi War. Many snickered while others openly called him a freak of nature, due to his third eye, that should be put down in the name of the Seven. When Robert saw him, he was inclined to agree with his men at first despite Ned vouching for him and asking the man to give Naruto a chance to prove himself. So Naruto being Naruto decided to make a wager with Robert. A wager surrounding his life. Naruto wagered he could kill well over 2,000 men with a single swing of his gunbai. Or rather, killed 2,000 men with a single swing of Uchiha Madara's gunbai, which he had taken following the end of the Fourth Shinobi War. If he failed to do that for Robert, the future king of the Seven Kingdoms could take his head, and that would be the end of it. Robert had looked at him like someone had just told him the Mad King was sane before glancing at Ned, who nodded at him to accept, and did so in front of the other soldiers of the army around him. Though none of them took him seriously. And why should they? He was a strange, mask-wearing individual, with 3 eyes, none of which were now identical to those that could actually see them, and lived to tell the tale. One eye was red, the other purple, the third one a light lavender that could be mistaken for a failed eye that could no longer see anything. But the joke was on them when Naruto walked forward, alone toward the army across the way, laughing at him for thinking he could fight them all alone. Even Robert's own army was doing the same while thinking the masked sage was mad and simply wanted to die. He shut them all up with a single swing of his gunbai and the enemy army of 12,000 men had been reduced to 8,000 with the 4,000 he killed becoming bloody chunks in the wind. After that, no one laughed at him. Quite the opposite. But that wasn't why Naruto was not welcoming Ned so much when entering his house to speak to him. The reason? Elia Martell of House Dorne, wife of Rhaegar Targaryen and mother to their children. Innocent children at that. Elia Martell of House Dorne and her children of Targaryen blood were the main reason for this friction between himself and Robert. Naruto had warned Ned that Robert was not of sound mind when on the march to take King's Landing, nor should they trust Tywin Lannister when the man had sent a raven to Robert with a coded message stating how he would help him take the throne from the Mad King. After the victory at the Trident with Rhaegar dead, Naruto knew that Tywin knew where the winds of victory were blowing, and didn't want to be caught in the fallout when the Mad King eventually died. So the Lion made a power play of his own when Robert marched his army to King's Landing and Jaime had killed the Mad King himself with a sword to his back. To ensure no one of Targaryen blood lived to sit on the throne in the future or challenge Robert, Tywin ordered Gregor, the Mountain, Clegane and Amory Lorch to kill Elia Martell along with her children. When the sacking of King's Landing occurred through Tywin's brilliant act of coming under the understanding by the king to help defend the city and the king himself from Robert's approaching forces, the two monsters in armor made their move. Killing the Kingsguard of the Red Keep in a brutal fashion befitting their reputations and moved to end the life of the queen and her children per their lord's orders. Fortunately, Naruto put a stop to that before the two could carry out their mission. Not that anyone, but Naruto himself knew that part. Just as the two monsters smashed down the door to Ilia's room, Naruto himself quickly appeared via Kamui, and put the two in a genjutsu which immobilized them for a time of a mere 30 minutes. It was still plenty of time for what Naruto needed to do, which involved getting Ilia, after explaining some things to the woman, and her children out of King's Landing the same way he came into the Red Keep. After that, Naruto proceeded to use the corpse clone jutsu, and used several bodies he had acquired in the form of dead men he had killed. A quick appliance of Fuinjutsu to put up a genjutsu on all three of the bodies to make them appear as if they were Ilia and her children to anyone else seeing them. When Gregor and Armory Lorch were free from the genjutsu, they were standing over a blood-soaked rug covering the bodies while under the impression they had done the deed their sick minds had easily created through the illusion Naruto put them under. When the two men went into the throne room, they saw Robert sitting on the throne, Ned standing beside him on one side, and twin Lannister on the other a few steps down. Not far away from them was Jaime Lannister, stained in blood of the Mad King, and the Mad King himself dead on the floor with his mad look still on his face. As they approached the Iron Throne, Tywin was smug over what he had done, and knew his reward for this was whatever he wanted it to be once asked. Ned glared at Jaime from time to time over the breaking of his oath to serve the king faithfully despite the king in question not being of sound mind. The friction between the Starks and the Lannisters got worse though when Tywin's two mad dogs came in with the bodies of Elia Martell and her children. The long trail of blood leaving the rug while dragging it effortlessly across the floor to the foot of the steps leading up to the throne only made it worse. Gregor proceeded to open the rug himself to show Robert the three bodies and was praised by Tywin for a job well done while the new king merely looked at the bodies for a few seconds before nodding his head once in acknowledgement of the deed done. Ned, however, wanted to reach for his sword, and kill the two men right there on the spot for this act of barbarism these two had done. Anyone with eyes capable of seeing could tell these deaths were not clean in the slightest and Ned knew there had been suffering behind each one. But Robert wouldn't allow it. As far as the new king of the Seven Kingdoms was concerned, the only good Targaryen was a dead one, and any who gave birth to them. So long as he didn't know how they died, only that they did die was enough for Robert. But not for Ned. The two had argued about it for weeks following Robert becoming king and how Jaime, Gregor, and Lorch should be sent to the wall for their crimes if not put to the sword. But for all their strength in terms of the bond of friendship, Robert would not agree to any of it. Not when Tywin now held so much influence over him and the Iron Throne. Finally, Ned had enough of Robert's stubbornness, and left King's Landing with his own army back to the north following the grand wedding between Robert and his new wife Cersei Lannister. When Ned was leaving with his army back home, Naruto had kept himself hidden from everyone until now, and spoke to the Lord of the North about the questionable actions of his most trusted friend, now King of the Seven Kingdoms after the sacking of King's Landing. Ned had tried to justify Robert's refusals to punish the three so-called knights, but the excuses themselves were weak even when explained to Naruto, and the sage shook his head at Ned's own stubbornness. But at least Ned knew what Tywin's mad dogs did was wrong and should be punished for it. Sadly, the Ned did not have the strength of will to act on it so long as Robert sat on the throne, and swore fealty to the man sitting on it. Naruto of course told Ned the true test of a man is to give him power and see what he does with it. Only time would tell what Robert would do on the seat of power and who around him would seek to manipulate the man with it. Fortunately, Jon Arryn of the Vale was named Hand of the King, and helped raise both Robert and Ned properly growing up. At the very least, Robert's rule was off to a good start on some level with Jon Arryn being in the second highest position below royal authority. But that wasn't why Naruto was having problems with Ned when they met a second and third time to ask for the man's aid. One was to help deal with the Greyjoy rebellion and the second was to help Ned's supposed bastard son Jon Snow survive the pox. Naruto had no problem saving Jon, but the Greyjoy rebellion was going to be a one-sided fight, and he knew that Ned knew it too. Still, Ned had persisted with him regarding House Greyjoy, who at first went unopposed by the Seven Kingdoms since no one knew it was coming until it was too late. Many had suffered when the Greyjoys attacked, raiding, pillaging, raping, kidnapping, and torching everything in sight. Eventually, Ned wore Naruto down and he agreed to help end the war quickly, but the sage told him not to call upon him for anything after the Greyjoys were put down. By the time Robert got a fleet ready to sail for the Iron Islands to end the rebellion against him, Naruto was already halfway there, walking on water, cutting a bloody path through the Greyjoy fleet with just Kabikura Bocho. It was at that point in time that Demon Sage, as he had been called by the many barbs following Robert's rebellion, spoken songs had soon given him the title, the Demon Sage who made the drowning god bleed. Given just how many men died single-handedly by Naruto's hands. When Robert, Ned, Stannis, and their armies, fleet made it to the Iron Islands and the Pike itself where Balin Greyjoy of House Greyjoy lived, Naruto had done a great deal of damage to the man's home. Well over half the army representing the Iron Islanders had fallen by his skills alone. Balon's own first and second-born sons being chief among them, with Naruto's sword slicing them in half. In fact, only Balon's third son Theon, and only daughter Yara Greyjoy were the last two remaining children left the man had that were still alive. To make it even worse for Balin on a personal level, Theon was being taken as Ned's ward back to Winterfell to keep the Greyjoys from making another attempt, and for Ned see that at least one of the Greyjoys didn't act like the rest in regards to their house motto of "We do not sow," when the boy was old enough to become his own man. And now here Ned was again. A fourth time. "Damn it, Ned, I know you're there. Don't knock. Just come in, take off your boots, and meet me in the living area," exclaimed Naruto to Ned, who was about to knock on the door of the sage's house. "I will never understand how he knows I'm here," thought Ned, as he was stupefied all the other times Naruto knew of his arrival, and figured it was one of the man's abilities yet to be disclosed. Still, Ned did as he was told by Naruto, and eventually made his way to the living area of the house where Naruto was found to be sitting on the long far side of the table waiting for his guest. The night before, when Ned came to ask for his assistance regarding the Greyjoy rebellion, the sage in front of him was not happy, and it showed in his eyes. All three of his eyes, no less. Ned still didn't know how Naruto's two blue eyes could change into one red and the other purple with strange designs in each one. Part of him didn't want to know and felt it was best not knowing. "Sit down, Ned, and tell me your worries or problems," grumbled Naruto while looking at some kind of game board with pieces already on it. From what Ned could surmise, the game had been played for a while by Naruto along with someone else, though who that someone was, the Lord of the North had no clue. Again, he didn't want to know, and decided not to ask despite Naruto looking so focused on the board game himself. "I need your help, Naruto. I am in need your advice. Your very counsel on something of great importance," said Ned with worry and concern in his voice and eyes. "The last time you spoke this way, it was to ask for my help to save John from the pox he got somehow when he was a mere boy," remarked Naruto with Ned nodding since he had remembered that fateful day. It was the day he revealed the truth to his wife about John not being his bastard son, but his late sister's son. Flashback: Winterfell many years ago. Catelyn Tully Stark, sometimes called Cat for short, sat in a chair right beside the bed of Jon Snow, bastard child of her husband Ned Stark. She had been beside herself when the boy had gotten sick. Her prayer to the old gods and even the Seven to have the boy not of her blood, but of her husband's through infidelity to perish from this world had hit her hard with guilt. She had wanted an innocent child to die because he was the progeny of her husband and a woman whose memory Catelyn herself despised for seducing the man she married into breaking his oath to be faithful. But she had no idea her prayers would be answered in such a way, whether by the old gods, or the Seven with their own rules in regards to such sin against the oath of marriage. To have an innocent child die simply because of her own spite was not something befitting of a Stark or a Tully, and Catelyn was both in that regard. So she had prayed again. Prayed to them all again. The old gods. The Seven. She had been praying for the pox to go away. To cure the boy of the disease and let him live. No sooner had she made the prayer and the promises attached to it, did Naruto arrive with Ned via Kamui. The man looked ready to throw up, but the sheer willpower and control helped keep him from releasing the contents of his stomach. "Ned, what are you doing here? And with him no less?" questioned Catelyn at seeing her husband appear practically out of thin air with Naruto, who was wearing his mask once more. Only Ned, Roderick, and Lewin were worthy of seeing his face at this point in time since they understood his need for privacy. "He came to help John. I asked him to help cure him of the pox," answered Ned after he had the strength to speak again while Naruto walked around the bed to the other side to take a good look at John. "It seems I don't have to do anything. The pox is already receding inside of him. said Naruto after putting a now glowing green hand on the boy's forehead to scan the boy's illness to see how it was progressing. It is? Asked Ned in shock while Caitlin looked happy about it despite said happiness beginning to wane every few seconds. Yes, recently too, though the reason behind it is strange, commented Naruto with a frown behind his mask. Strange? In what way? Asked Ned with a hint of concern in his voice. The disease was not defeated by John's own body fighting it. He had help. Something or someone cured John of his disease, continued Naruto with his scan of the boy showing the pox was now on the retreat and John would be awake sometime tomorrow. Thank the gods, whispered Ned while Caitlin nodded in agreement. But Naruto wasn't convinced it was something to be joyous about. Not yet. This wasn't some cure made by a maester or grand maester. No, this was divine intervention. And the only way divine intervention could happen is if someone prayed hard enough and had put themselves in a binding contract. And the only one in the room when Ned and Naruto arrived was Caitlin Stark. What did you do? Asked Naruto curiously when he turned to look at Kat and saw the woman stiffen at his words. Naruto? Questioned Ned when he saw how the sage looked at his wife with those three piercing eyes. I don't know what you mean, great sage, replied Caitlin respectfully, but couldn't keep her eyes on him when she answered. Don't lie to me, Caitlin Tully Stark. Now is not the time to lie and keep secrets from me when it comes to this matter, replied Naruto firmly with Ned frowning further. I would appreciate it you didn't question my wife's honor about this, Naruto. You are a sage of ancient lost forgotten arts, but I will not tolerate your words aimed at my wife, said Ned fiercely toward the man. And I would appreciate it if your wife were being honest with me and with you about the boy being cured. What did you promise the old gods and the seven? Naruto shot back while still keeping his eyes on Caitlin. I don't know what you mean, replied Caitlin again while Naruto's three eyes narrowed. You prayed for John to be cured of the pox before we arrived. The gods of either the old or the seven answered your call. You put yourself in a binding contract with them. You made a few promises to them. Important promises. Promises that if not kept by you, will have severe and dire consequences for yourself, your husband, for House Stark, and even House Tully. So what did you promise them, Caitlin? Questioned Naruto with Caitlin going pale at being discovered, and it was seen by Ned when he looked at her. Is it true? You promised the gods something in return for John's health returning? Asked Ned with Caitlin reluctantly nodding. I did. When you went off to find some means to cure John, no doubt seeking him to aid you, I prayed to the old gods, and to the seven for mercy. To save John from the pox, answered Caitlin while Naruto leaned down and began to actually sniff the boy like an animal searching for some kind of scent. And they answered? I almost can't believe it. This is great news indeed, exclaimed Ned happily since it showed Caitlin was warming up to John despite how things had started out between the two. No, it's not, Ned, replied Naruto for Caitlin despite the good news the Lord of the North just received about John. What do you mean? John is cured by the gods themselves, countered Ned while Naruto shook his head. You forget, Caitlin made a promise to them. Or rather promises, plural, as is more than one promise. You should be asking yourself just what are those specific promises she had made to them? And if it is within your power to see them fulfilled, said Naruto with Ned now looking at Caitlin, who looked away from them both. What did you promise them? Caitlin, what did you promise them for John's life being saved by the pox? Asked Ned when Caitlin was hesitant to answer. I promised I would push for you to legitimize John to become a Stark and that I would raise John as if he was my own son. My own child, answered Caitlin at last while Ned looked at her in shock before hugging her. I had no idea. I'm sorry, my love. I didn't mean to burden you so much, whispered Ned while he held her close to him. Only for Naruto to laugh and shake his head at them. You shouldn't embrace her so suddenly, Ned. Not after what I just found, replied Naruto while he was done examining a still sleeping John. Why? Caitlin will keep her promise and I will help her in any way I can, said Ned, as he still held his wife close, and scowled slightly at the sage. I don't know about that first part, but what I do know is John got sick because the boy was given the pox by the same gods that cured him. And the only reason they would do that is if someone prayed to them to kill him, replied Naruto while giving Ned a pointed look before they went to Caitlin. No, I won't believe it, stated Ned with Naruto shaking his head. Believe what you will, Ned Stark. But I know what I sense and smell on John. The same gods that cured him of the pox, gave him the pox, and they only cured him because they were moved by Caitlyn's words and the agreement she made to them. She bound herself, you, your children, and basically your 2 houses into this agreement of promises made. Promises I suspect she would not have kept and would never told you about in the first place, remarked Naruto while Ned looked at Caitlyn and could tell from the way his wife could look back into his eyes that the sage spoke the truth. Caitlyn, why? Why would you wish? Why would you pray for John to die? To be given the pox? He is his innocent child, questioned Ned while Caitlyn began to cry and had a fierce look in her eyes. Because I hated what he represented, Ned. You rode off to war to fight the Mad King. I accepted it, given what happened with your family. Men go off to war, fight each other, kill each other. When you came back, I was so happy to see you had returned alive, and still whole despite knowing a piece of you that I couldn't see was lost in the process. But when you also brought back John and called him your bastard, I couldn't stand for it. I did not want to stand for it. You made an oath to me when we married Ned Stark. A sacred oath to be faithful to me and to never lay with another woman so long as I was alive. The boy was living, breathing proof of you having broken your sacred oath to me. Every day I watched John grow and the constant reminder of your infidelity. So yes, I prayed for John to die. To be struck down in some manner and let his continued existence that was your very shame haunt me no longer, confessed Caitlyn, as she felt the need to hold back no longer possible, and just air out what her heart screamed to be said. But that changed when he got the pox, surmised Ned with Caitlyn nodding. I hated John, or rather, I hated the woman who brought him into the world. I hated the fact you laid with a woman who wasn't me and gave birth to this child of your blood, but not my own. I wanted John to die, but not by means of the pox. A riding accident, falling down the stairs, a loose rock from the tower striking him on the head. A quick death is what I wanted, Ned. Not the pox. Not something that would cause an innocent child, even a bastard such as yours, to suffer. When I realized what I had done to put John through this suffering, the guilt I felt over it shamed me greatly. I am a Tully by blood. You know our house motto is, family, duty, honor. Deep down, I knew what I had done to John, and his possible death went against all those things my house stands for. So I prayed. I prayed that the pox would be removed and I would be given a chance to remove such dishonor from myself and my house. But even though John has been cured of the pox by the gods, whether by the old, or by the 7 themselves, part of me does not want to honor my promise to them, answered Caitlyn while Ned looked at her in shock and Naruto sighed. You have to honor it, Caitlyn. You must. If you don't, both of our houses will suffer for it. Our children will suffer, exclaimed Ned while Caitlyn nodded, but it was clear she was still angry with him. It would not be this way had you kept your vows, Ned Stark, and not sired a bastard with some woman I will never know. For years, I have lived with the fact there was a woman with no face to her name that I can openly hate, and the closest person I am capable of hating for your crime is in this bed recovering from the disease my anger and prayers put into him, said Caitlyn with Ned looking away in shame since he knew this was partially his fault. Again, Naruto laughed at them both. Damn it, Ned, when you fuck up something big, you fuck up something big, remarked Naruto while moving away from John and sitting in another chair near the door. What do you mean? Asked Ned with Naruto giving him a pointed, you damn well know what I mean, look that told the Lord of the North he knew the truth about John. What do you think I mean, Ned? Honestly, I know you made a promise to your sister, but I think in this case, you can let Caitlyn in on the secret, replied Naruto with Ned glaring at him and Caitlyn looking at the two in confusion. What promise? Ned, what is he talking about? What secret have you been keeping from me about your sister Liana? Asked Caitlyn while Ned was hesitant to answer. It is not something I wish to tell. It's not that I don't want to tell you, Cat, but I fear the eyes and ears of the walls around us in Winterfell will be listening when I do not want them to listen, replied Ned while Caitlyn was confused. If you are worried about someone overhearing what they shouldn't, said Naruto lazily before smashing his monk staff on the ground, and the room was soon covered in lines upon lines of fuinjutsu. Ned? Asked Caitlyn worriedly while seeing the line of fuinjutsu on the walls and was a bit frightened by it. Relax, Caitlyn. Naruto is just ensuring no one overhears us in this room, right? Said Ned with Naruto nodding. That's correct. No one outside of this room will have the ability to see or hear anything that goes on in here. So go on, Ned. Tell her what you couldn't after coming back from the war against the Mad King about John, said Naruto with Ned taking in and letting out a long breath before he readied himself to reveal his secret. Jon is not my bastard. He's not my son, said Ned while he looked Catelyn in the eyes with his wife looking at him in shock. If he's not your son or bastard, then who? Who is his mother? Who is the father? Asked Catelyn while Ned looked at Naruto, who nodded to him to continue. He's Lyanna's child. Jon is not a Snow. He has the blood of a Stark and Targaryen in his veins, replied Ned with Catelyn gasping in shock. Lyanna's child? And of Targaryen blood too? But that would mean Rhaegar. He violated her, said Kat in shock with Ned shaking his head while Naruto rolled his eyes. No, she was not raped. She wasn't even kidnapped by Rhaegar like I first thought. My sister went with him willingly. You remember the tournament from which he won and proclaimed Lyanna the Queen of Beauty in front of everyone there? Even in front of Elia Martell herself? Everyone was shocked by what he had done, but despite that, my sister actually accepted it, and was not appalled by his actions as I thought she would be upon being given the title given it was from a married man. In truth, Lyanna had fallen in love with Rhaegar, and went with him in secret to Dorne at the Tower of Joy where they had eloped. The rules of marriage in Dorne are much more open there and thus allowed the marriage to be legal despite the secrecy, said Ned while Catelyn looked at him shocked. How do you know all of this? Asked Catelyn with Ned closing his eyes for a second and recalling the memory. Because Lyanna told me this, right before her death. After bringing Jon into the world, Lyanna died shortly after from too much blood loss. I promised her I would protect Jon from his future enemies. I swore it on my honor as a Stark and so I hid Jon's true identity from everyone else. Even the name of the woman I supposedly laid with is false. Willow was the closest name I could think of at the time to keep both Robert or Tywin Lannister from knowing the truth when they saw him for the first time when I told them he was my bastard, replied Ned with Catelyn looking at her husband with a frown at the last part. Tywin Lannister I can understand given his betrayal to the Mad King, but, Robert? Why would you wish to protect Jon from Robert? Jon is Lyanna's son, stated Catelyn since he knew how much the man loved Ned's sister. She was the reason Robert went to war in the first place. Because Robert's hatred for House Targaryen in general is sadly far greater than his own love for Lyanna Stark, said Ned before he told her about Robert approving what Gregor Clegane and Amory Lorch did to Elia Martell after they killed her children. And add in Jon as Rhaegar Targaryen's child from his time with Lyanna in Dorne would make Robert see red and smash their child to pieces with his war hammer, added Naruto since he knew it was true. But Jon is Lyanna's child, protested Catelyn while Ned shook his head. And Rhaegar is Jon's father. Lyanna loved Rhaegar, not Robert. If Robert ever found out the truth, he would have realized his reasons for war were based on a lie. A love that would not be returned by her in the slightest. He would have killed Jon in a heartbeat. I know he would have done it himself without a hint of mercy or regret. So when the time came to pass Jon off as my bastard in the hopes of saving Lyanna's legacy, I provided a story of how I was drunk after Lyanna's death in the Tower of Joy, and had surrendered myself to a night of passion with a woman I did not truly know. Robert didn't even think I would deceive him with my lie and didn't even question it. If anything, he was amused by the idea I would do such a thing, and joked how the one time can be the most damning given my marriage to you. Tywin I know would have questioned Jon's birth more closely if not for the noticeable fact Jon's own Stark features are too strong to say he is anything else but a Stark, explained Ned with Catelyn looking from him to Jon and began to cry. I don't believe it, I almost killed Lyanna's child. Oh by the old gods and the new, what have I done? Said Catelyn before she hugged her husband and cried into his chest. You prayed he would live, Cat. That is enough, replied Ned while holding her close. Not quite, Ned. She still has a promise to keep. 2 of them if I remember correctly, said Naruto while he glanced from the 2 and over to Jon's sleeping form. You are right, Naruto. We need to keep those 2 promises Catelyn made. One does not make promises to the old gods or the 7 and come out of them unscathed, said Ned while the man looked at Catelyn, but she was clearly worried. But how? The only way to get Jon legitimized is to ask Robert to make it a royal decree with the backing of the High Septon. If you were to find out about Jon's true heritage being part Targaryen, said Catelyn while the image of Jon now being killed by Robert's warhammer making her cringe. He won't know. I won't tell him about Jon being part Targaryen. He's being legitimized as a Stark. If Robert or the High Septon ask, I will tell them Jon became ill with the pox, and you prayed to the gods to save his life. How they answered when you promised to help me legitimize him as a Stark. I can have countless witnesses testify to Jon having the pox, and Maester Lewin confirmed Jon was near death. Robert knows I would never lie to him about such a thing, and the High Septon could easily claim what happened to Jon being cured was the act of the Seven, said Ned, since he knew Robert would do this for him if asked, and with the evidence of the gods acting on Jon's behalf would be perfect to make him a Stark. Like he should have been from the start. But what about Cersei, Robert's wife? She's a Lannister? I have heard about that woman and how she acts around others seeking to strengthen her house. That woman will fight Robert tooth and nail to keep Jon a bastard, replied Catelyn with Ned grimace, since he had heard the same about the woman being a very possessive woman when it came to the coveting of power. She's not wrong, Ned. Cersei will see this as an attack on House Lannister's power base in the Western Lands and on the Iron Throne, added Naruto, since he knew what Cersei did to poor Maggie the Frog when the Wood Witch and his last true disciple all those years ago during his travels throughout the world, even prior to when Ned found him, had hidden herself away on Lannister lands. Naruto had warned Maggie about trying to use her power he taught to look into the future was dangerous for anyone to openly know about. Naturally, Maggie had decided to ignore him, and do it anyway. Which was a shame, since Maggie had such potential, and it was rare for him to see such potential during his travels throughout Essos. Sadly, Maggie got into some major trouble with some highly wealthy, and equally powerful people there with the use of her fortune-telling. As such, she had to flee Essos, and arrive in Westeros, where she believed the woods near Castle Rock would be safe to live in. At least until Cersei came along and took the description of her future personally, when the answers to the questions Maggie gave her were not the ones she wanted. Cersei had repaid Maggie for her fortune-telling by having the Wood Witch killed violently under the premise of living unlawfully on Lannister lands. Even Queen Cersei cannot stop the High Septon from acknowledging what happened to Jon was divine intervention and the binding promise my made, replied Ned, knowing he would have some trouble in the future with Cersei and make Robert's life difficult in the process when asking to legitimize Jon as a Stark. But that was the life of a king. Well, if I'm no longer needed here, I will take my leave, and entrust the future Jon Stark to your loving care once more, said Naruto before giving a mock salute, removed the lines of Fuinjutsu from the walls, and vanished from their sight via Kamui. I will never get used to seeing that, remarked Catelyn with Ned smirking. You should try traveling in that manner, joked Ned, since the trip from the sage's house to Winterfell nearly made him vomit. I think I will pass, replied Catelyn before she smiled and sat down in the chair next to Jon Snow, who would soon become a true member of the family. And Catelyn Tully Stark would do what she should have done from the start with young Jon when brought home by Ned. She was going to love him as if he were her own child. End flashback. I have seen some disturbing signs as of late. Signs by the gods themselves of something threatening my house. And I received word by Raven from King's Landing informing of Jon Arryn's death. At the same time, Catelyn got a message from her sister Lisa stating the Lannisters were responsible for his death by poison, and had fled to the Vale with their only son Robin, said Ned, with Naruto sighing a long sigh and continued to smoke from his pipe while his eyes were still on the board game. I take it that's not all that's got you spooked, Ned. Those instances were by the hands of mortals, not gods, remarked Naruto with Ned nodding, though his face got increasingly worried. I was out in the woods hunting with my sons, Jon and Theon. We noticed a dead female dire wolf near a stream. She had been killed by the stag in a fight with the antlers of the stag in her throat. At the same time, we noticed a litter of dire wolf pups, and realized the female dire wolf had somehow given birth despite her death. Each pup has been claimed by a member of my family, but it speaks ill to me since the dire wolf is the symbol of my house, replied Ned with Naruto nodding, since that did seem a bit odd in his mind. And you want me to try interpreting the signs correctly to see if all these signs of gods and men are a combination of something bigger aimed against House Stark, surmised Naruto with Ned nodding. I would greatly appreciate it. I know I am asking much from you for doing this for me when you wish to be left alone. Especially after the issue with House Bolton 5 years ago, said Ned with Naruto giving him a pointed, you should have kept a better eye on them, type of look. After the Greyjoy rebellion, I made it clear to Robert, you, Stannis, and just about every other house on the warpath that I wanted to be left alone. Robert didn't care by this point since he found out from his younger brother Stannis that I prevented him from capturing and killing both Viserys and Daenerys Targaryen during his own rebellion. Back when the two Targaryens were still just children on their ship fleeing Dragonstone for Essos. He couldn't punish me, so Stannis was his next best target. And as for House Bolton, the greedy asshole, and his bastard son should have left me alone like everybody else. Stated Naruto angrily, as he had been content being in his home, alone, and in blissful solitude away from the violence of the world. Only for Roose Bolton and his bastard son Ramsay Snow to pay him a visit to ask for his help in giving them both similar powers to increase the greatness of House Bolton. Roose had made it no secret to him that he was not happy being under the thumb of House Stark and wanted to become the new Warden of the North. He had tried to appeal to Naruto to see his point of view on how the North was getting soft and weak under the rule of House Stark. Roose wanted his house to rise up and become the rulers of the North and control it with an iron fist that was not afraid to flay those who defied him instead of sending them to the wall. Naruto had told Roose no in regards to taking down House Stark, so House Bolton could rise simply on the reason the man speaking to him was an idiot. A greedy idiot who had long since enjoyed hurting people and wanted to make his practices legal after Ned Stark made the very thing House Bolton was known for illegal. Naruto explained to Roose that his power was not transferable to others. Even if it was possible, Naruto had no intention of transferring any such power over to such a sadistic asshole like Roose, much less his evil bastard spawn Ramsay. And yes, Naruto had told Roose and Ramsay those very same words to their faces. They didn't take his words well. This was proven roughly a week later when Roose and Ramsay came back with the most elite men from their house, who shared in the same sadistic tendencies. All of which surrounded flaying, torture, raping someone regardless of their gender, and all around killing anyone simply because they all believed it was their right as members of House Bolton. In fact, Roose's bannermen were people who were sadistic, cruel, and were not afraid to betray a fellow Northerner or anyone else if given the chance or command by Roose himself. Sadistic bastards both figuratively and in some cases literally. Each man had brought their own set of weapons and skills to take Naruto down so they could find out how to get the power of the sage out of him so they could have it. With this power, House Bolton would rise up and become the dominant power in the North, and maybe even all of the Seven Kingdoms. Roose and Ramsay of course failed to realize that Naruto was not one to face threats from his pawns and simply cower in fear of them. He had seen worse odds in terms of numbers aimed against him. He had faced worse odds aimed against him. Worse opponents too, in the form of the White Walkers ages ago long past, when Bran the Builder asked him for his help in keeping everything beyond the giant wall of ice at bay from reaching the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. If only the people knew it wasn't magic keeping the ice on the wall from melting, but the nature chakra itself infused into it. In any case, Naruto saw the small army of 200 men, plus Roose and Ramsay among them sporting weapons, and bloodlust-filled looks aimed at his person. Roose believed he had the edge despite Naruto's legendary skills in killing well over 10 times as many men as Roose brought with him. Taunting Naruto while calling the sage an idiot for not giving him and his bastard what they wanted. Saying how when they claimed his secrets, all of House Bolton would claim his power, and the North would fall under his gentle hands, with the way it was spoken making the men around him chuckle. It stopped when Naruto let out a chuckle of amusement. Well, Ned, the good news is the act of Jon Arryn is not the will, or the wish of any gods watching over Westeros. Whether they be old gods, the Seven, or any other religion throughout the Seven Kingdoms. That was done by multiple figures currently lurking in the shadows to move pieces into play for their own machination and plays for power, replied Naruto at last while staring at the board game. And the bad news? Asked Ned, knowing well enough that the good news came with bad. There are signs from what you told me of some kind of deity working against you. Not the old gods and not the Seven, so it's not them. Especially since I know you and Caitlyn kept your promises regarding Jon after that little talk we all had despite the ripple it sent through Robert's court, replied Naruto with a frown and moved a piece forward on the game board. But what deity would go against us? Asked Ned, since he didn't think any of the gods worshipped throughout the different realms and Seven Kingdoms as a whole would seek them harm. It's not an actual deity per se. It's more of an actual demon from hell who is trying to ascend into becoming a deity by removing all others in the process. He has worshippers in Essos too, blinded by their devotion to him, and is considered the Lord of Light they have there. He gets stronger in times of war, strife, pain, and of course burning people alive at the stake with fire of all things so long as it's in his name. Of course, this only makes him stronger if all those things are done in his name. The more people are killed, sacrificed by means of fire in his name, the stronger he eventually becomes, and wishes to use you as a pawn or stepping stone to one day challenge the other gods via conflict. No doubt he has one or will have one of his priests or priestess already in Westeros, if not soon enough to begin the conversion process, answered Naruto while still smoking his pipe calmly. So a demonic false deity is trying to stir trouble for my house in the hopes it will cause problems and make him stronger to combat the other gods, surmised Ned with Naruto nodding. Yes, but all the same Ned, you need to keep your wits sharp and eyes open in the near future, replied Naruto with Ned nodding again, but looked hesitant to say something. Naruto, my wife believes Robert will come up here in the north to Winterfell to name me Hand of the King. If that is indeed true and the Lannisters are behind Jon Arryn's death, a sinister plot is being made in the shadows. A place for all my skills as a warrior of the north, I cannot see in the slightest. I know I have no right to ask you this, but will you come with me to King's Landing? Asked Ned with Naruto groaned at his request. Ned, you know I'm not loved by Robert. Or the Lannisters. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if the High Septon urged the king to order my execution simply because of my powers, and how they are frowned upon by the Seven. Which, contrary to what the Septon may tell you, is 100% false. The Seven don't hate magic. They just hate it when people use magic for dark purposes, stated Naruto before letting out a sigh. I need you at King's Landing with me if I become the Hand of the King there. I am not so naive as I once was to believe those surrounding Robert are honorable and will help him protect his kingdom from falling into ruin. What you left as proof of House Bolton's treachery after destroying the Dreadfort was a hard lesson for someone my age and with my beliefs to learn, said Ned, since the issue with House Bolton's destruction and the reason behind it by the sage's own hands showed Ned that not everyone in the north was trustworthy. Say Robert does make you Hand of the King, who will run Winterfell, and the north? Asked Naruto casually with Ned so focused on him that the Warden of the North failed to see a piece on the board move discreetly under his very nose. My son Robb can rule over the North in my stead. He is my heir after all. And Jon will be able to help him should something happen further north at the Wall as a member of the Night's Watch, answered Ned, since Jon had talked about taking the Black to be with his uncle Benjen. Jon going to the Wall is fine, but as a member of the Night's Watch? I would strongly advise against that, replied Naruto with Ned frowning. Why? Asked Ned curiously, since he thought Jon going willingly was a good thing. Don't get me wrong, Jon is a good lad, and you trained him well to be a good fighter when using a sword. But the fact remains the Night's Watch is not what it once was in days of old. It's filled with murders, rapists, thieves, dishonorable scum, who go there to avoid being put to the sword. Those on the Wall who are honorable and can keep them in line are either too old or too few in number. Everyone in the Seven Kingdoms knows Jon became a legitimized bastard at this point, and those of the vile or poor people sent to the Wall will look at him with great disdain. They'll still see him as a bastard, who got lucky in having a loving father for a high lord despite everything else, and was given a cushy lifestyle. The only type of bastard that is hated even more than a bastard of a high-ranking noble or king, is a bastard legitimized by his father, and claims what many would say is one he is not meant to have in life. Those on the Wall will not welcome Jon with open arms, Ned, said Naruto with Ned frowning at these words. I had not thought of that. But Jon wishes to go to the Wall and he is old enough to make his own decisions in life. I won't try to take away his right to forge his own destiny, said Ned with Naruto nodding, since he agreed. I understand. What I'm suggesting is Jon visit the Wall under the pretense of inspecting it for weaknesses and visiting his uncle. Don't have him take the oath needed to become a member of the Night's Watch. Not yet anyway. If what I have seen so far is anything to go by, him as one of its members will not do you, or House Stark well in the future. For now, just have him go as your representative to the Wall to see how many men are there, and inspect the various defenses before reporting them back here to Robb, said Naruto with Ned giving him a reluctant nod. Jon won't like that. Not at first anyway, remarked Ned with Naruto shaking his head. I know. Just tell him to hold off on making the commitment until after going up there first to make a report on the status of the wall itself. That you want him to get a feel for the wall before swearing his life to it," replied Naruto with Ned thinking it over before nodding. "I will talk to him when I get back. If anything, this will allow John to think about all of his choices before making any decisions," said Ned while Naruto smirked at the man. "That's the idea. As for me going with you to King's Landing, are you really sure you want me there? Robert has no love for me and neither does his wife. It may cause quite a bit of friction, even before we leave Winterfell for King's Landing," questioned Naruto again with Ned nodding. "I know Robert well enough that he will listen to me regarding this one way or another despite his dislike for you on a personal level. Besides, you helped in the securing of his kingship to the Iron Throne more than he is willing to admit," replied Ned with Naruto being silent for a moment. "If he only knew I helped Elia Martell and her children escape from King's Landing alive to Dorne. I told the Dornish prince to keep up the facade they were dead and his side of the Seven Kingdoms was stewing angrily over it. Prince Doran has no problem with that since he is the cooler and calm head of the ruling family in Dorne. Prince Oberyn is the more aggressive of the two and nearly went to war with just the Lannisters on that alone had I not told him his actions would only endanger his sister and her children. Robert hates all things Targaryen and would have no problem hiring assassins from every corner of the Seven Kingdoms to kill anyone with Targaryen blood or was married to one. So long as Robert believes them dead, Dorne along with the royal family there are safe from harm, and there is still the issue of the Mad King's own children. I should probably pay the two a visit or see if either of them inherited their father's madness. Damn inbreeding does more harm than most people even realize," thought Naruto while sighing again and looking at the game board before moving another piece. "Naruto?" asked Ned while seeing the sage was deep in thought. "Fuck it, I will help you out in King's Landing, Ned. But seriously, I'm not going to hold your hand while there every damn time you hit a snag. From what I know, a lot of snakes have been making their nests in King's Landing, and the stag no longer has the strength to keep them in line. Know that Robert ever did in the first place. Don't be surprised if these snakes plan to strike you at some point where their venom having long-lasting effects if bitten," warned Naruto with Ned nodding, but smiled all the same. "Thank you my friend. I know I am asking you for much given how you prefer solitude given your past. But the Seven Kingdoms and the realm of men need you now more than ever. I can only do so much for Robert as Hand of the King and I am just one man from the north. I cannot see, hear, or understand the language of shadows and deception. I am a soldier who fights and kills his enemy on the battlefield where I can stare them in the eyes," said Ned with Naruto nodding to him and watching the Warden of the North leave his home after shaking his hand in respect. "While I loathe to come back into the world once again, I feel even I have no choice in the matter if what my visions showed me recently. To beware the lioness and her cubs, who are not true stags. To not trust the man with little fingers. To ensure the wolf's den is protected from the slumbering kraken should the beast of the ocean realize how empty the den of the wolf truly is when one of its own returns with such news. Then the issue of the White Walkers and their hatred for all things alive. Damn Zetsu clones. I thought I had killed you off over thousands of years ago. But it seems you not only survived, but changed your body's genetic makeup, actually found a way to reproduce, and evolved into these abominations the North calls White Walkers. At least they no longer have that damn Kaguya's will driving them to do this. Though now their own is just as bad if not worse," said Naruto to himself while more pieces on the board were now moving and he let out another sigh. The pieces among this Game of Thrones were moving once more. The king's arrival to Winterfell was imminent. Already his escort of Kingsguard and the red-golden colors indicating Lannister soldiers mixed within it were visible from the high towers of the castle. The large carriage in the group held the royal family was seen from the towers of the castle and signaled for the members of House Stark to hurry and present themselves before the king's arrival into the castle gates. Quickly, Ned was able to get his wife, children, Jon, and even his ward Theon Greyjoy presentable for when Robert arrived. Not easy when Ned's youngest of his two daughters, Arya Stark, was running around trying to be more soldier than lady. Ned's oldest daughter Sansa Stark was ready around the same time as her mother was in being prepared to greet their very important guests, as it was what proper women did when around knights, lords, princes, and of course kings. Brandon Stark, who was Ned's second eldest child, was almost as bad as Arya in running around and worried Caitlyn over his constant desire to climb up stone towers to the highest windows they possessed. Naruto found it amusing. "Your encouragement of his climbing is not helping," commented Caitlyn, with Brandon running off to get ready after he came down to tell his mother up close that Robert and his royal escort were now seeable from the tower he just finished climbing. "He's a young boy cat. Don't hold it against him. Bran the Builder was the same way when he asked me to help him make the wall," said Naruto with his mask on, and saw how some of Ned's children looked at him when he arrived in Winterfell. "You knew Bran the Builder?" asked Caitlyn in shock. I did, when he was just a boy. Brandon loved to climb up things almost as much as he wanted to make them. Buildings, towers, castles, and anything else that was climbable he wanted to climb. Including the wall the Night's Watch sits upon. His mother always worried about him when growing up. She didn't think his behavior was befitting someone of his station, but her mood changed a bit when he began building things. Of course, her mood changed again when he started to climb them to see if they were in fact climbable, but that's beside the point. In any case, I see a lot of your son in him. The best thing for Brandon now would be to have him read from the library about some of the things Bran the Builder made and challenge him to see if he can improve on their designs. Give him a proper outlet for his energy that is healthy and productive for him," answered Naruto before walking to the stable to see how the gentle giant of a man Hodor was doing with the dire wolves he was ordered to clean up. "Father, is that masked fellow really the sage you told us about when we were younger, and fighting in King Robert's rebellion?" asked Sansa while glancing where the long-haired masked man walked. "Aye, he is indeed the sage I told you about. The one who helped Robert and myself during the rebellions," answered Ned while making sure his children and Jon were all presentable. "He doesn't look so tough," remarked Arya gruffly with a scowl, with her eyes watching Naruto too. But she was more fascinated by the man's supposed ability to crush all of his enemies with a single hand gesture or swing of the many swords in his possession. "You haven't seen him fight, Arya, and I pray you never do. Many lives fell at his feet with a single swing of a sword of choice on hand he possesses," replied Ned, since he had seen Naruto fight both with swords, magic, and hand-to-hand combat. None of which he would wish on his worst enemy. Not even the Mad King. "Do you think we could best him in a fight, father? All three of us together?" asked Robb curiously, with Jon looking at his father, too. "Sadly, I do not believe it is possible, Robb. Not even on our best day and him at his worst could we best someone like the sage in combat," said Ned, with Roderick standing beside the family and nodding in agreement. I have seen the man fight all by himself alone against entire armies. He wiped out his foes by the hundreds if not the thousands. Whole lines of banner men ran at the mere sight of the sage. He soon became more feared by the enemy than even the Mad King," commented Roderick, since he had seen what Ned did when the sage fought against the Targaryens. "Do you think he would honor us with a spar? I would still love to fight against someone of his strength," asked Jon, since he heard from his parents how the sage had helped get him legitimized as a Stark. Of course, he had been told the truth behind his parentage just a few years ago when he was mature enough to understand things. Even still, Jon considered both Ned and even Catelyn Stark his parents. They raised him, loved him. Sure, Catelyn took a while in her warming up to him, but that was before she learned the truth, and on some level he even understood her initial dislike of him. "Maybe, if you ask politely, treat him with respect and he will return it," offered Ned, since Naruto was like that with people. It didn't matter if you were the small folk or not, king or not, lord or not, bastard or not, you treat the man with respect, he will return it, and then some, so long as you continue to stay respectful. "The king is approaching," whispered Catelyn before any more could be spoken further about Naruto from her family. Sure enough, King Robert Baratheon had arrived first on horseback with his escort right behind him. It took him some effort to get off of his horse because his rounded size made it difficult to get off the poor animal. Arya had to hold back her laughter that had wanted to come out at seeing the king, and Catelyn sent her a glare to be respectful, though the woman herself did have to fight back her own smirk for a brief second. "Your Grace," said Ned while bowing in front of Robert, who was appraising the man with a frown. "You've gotten fat," remarked Robert while Ned looked up at the king from his position with a "Are you serious?" look on his face after glancing at Robert's girth. Before the two erupted in laughter and hugged in brotherly friendship. "It's good to see you, Robert," said Ned while Robert nodded. It's good to see you too, Ned. Damn, it's been a long time, remarked Robert in an almost afterthought kind of way. I've been taking care of Winterfell for you. The north is yours after all, replied Ned, as he motioned for Robert to see his family. So this is the young brood of Starks you have sired since being here in Winterfell. Quite a strong bunch, the lot of them, said Robert while appraising each one from Robb to Jon to Sansa all the way to young Rickon Stark. Yes, each one worthy of their house name and then some. I made sure of that, replied Ned with pride in his voice while seeing Robert looking impressed while shocked to see they had actual dire wolves being raised within the castle walls. Actual dire wolves. I didn't think they lived this far south. I know your house sigil is the dire wolf, Ned, but this is taking it to another level, joked Robert with a chuckle and glanced at each dire wolf now being attended to by their assigned owners. It was also a surprise to us too when we found them all as pups that day. It seems was not that long ago. I took it as a sign from the gods to bring them into our house to be raised by my children. One for each, replied Ned while leaving out how the female dire wolf that birthed them died in a fight with a stag. They do grow up big. They well trained? Asked Robert with Ned nodding. As trained as dire wolves can be trained. We treat them with respect and make sure they hunt in the woods so they don't let their natural instincts to hunt for food turn on us like my wife fears, answered Ned with Robert laughing at that last part. I bet Cat gets scared half the time seeing them sneak up on her or walking down the hall when she least expects it, remarked Robert with a smile before frowning when he sees one person coming toward them. King Robert, it's been some time, commented Naruto while many of the Kingsguard and Lannister men quickly went for their weapons. Much to the surprise of Cersei, Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella when they got out of the carriage to see Robert had been talking to his old friend. What the fuck are you doing here? Asked Robert coldly since while keeping his voice down so his children didn't hear him. We have much to talk about, your grace. Things that must be spoken in private, replied Ned seriously while Robert looked from Naruto to Ned and back again to Naruto before nodding. Fine, let's go to the crypt and pay my respects. We can talk after about these important things of yours afterwards. I have to talk to you anyway about important matters of my own, said Robert with a hint of anger in his voice. Robert, my love, surely the dead can wait. We only just arrived and everyone is tired, said Cersei while glancing from Robert to Naruto with a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Now Ned, you too, Naruto, commanded Robert with Ned glancing at the queen with an apologetic look on his face before sending a look to Catelyn to go help entertain their royal guests as best she could. Dog, who was that masked man just now? The one that has upset my father so much? Asked Joffrey with the giant of a man with half his face burned named Dog, glancing down at the prince and heir to the Iron Throne. If what my memory about his appearance is true, young prince, he is the one called the Demon Sage, and the one who helped your father take the Iron Throne. He also helped your father keep it when putting down the Greyjoys in the Greyjoy Rebellion. The bards still sing the tale of how the man walked on water and cut through the sea with his sword that many say made the drowning god bleed, answered Dog, while finding he had his own hand gripping his sword on instinct at the mere sight of the sage. Oh come now, hound, such stories about him are for the bards to tell in song at bars, and the women to speak about the infamous demon sage to their children in order to make them behave, said Jaime Lannister while not believing for 1 second the stories about the masked man despite the fact the stories came from his own father. And his father was never one to lie. But even Jaime felt such stories from the aging lion were far-fetched in some places. Where's the imp? Asked Arya curiously and suddenly since she had wanted to see the lowest and equally the shortest member on the House Lannister poll. Arya, behave yourself. That is no way for a lady to act. Catelyn said in a reprimanding tone while glancing at Cersei with a "I'm sorry" look on her face. It's quite all right, Lady Stark. My brother has that effect on people no matter their status in life. My brother Jaime will find him and hopefully be presentable to your family when the time comes, said Cersei while sending Jaime a "find your brother or else" looked at the man knew all too well. While the two families mingled together, with Tommen and Myrcella actually enjoying their time with the Stark children, and even their dire wolves. Another conversation was brewing below Winterfell. House Stark crypt. Tell me about Jon Arryn? How did he die? Asked Ned while Robert walked over to Lyanna's statue. Damnedest thing, Ned. One moment, he was fine, and then the next a fever burned right through him. Whatever it was that did him in. I loved that man, said Robert mournfully while thinking back to the many years John had raised him and Ned under his care. We all did. He was a second father to us both, replied Ned with Robert nodding in full agreement. I need you in King's Landing, Ned. Not here in the north freezing your ass off where you can do little to no good. With John Aaron gone, I'm going to be up to my ass in problems. Granted, I already am up to my ass in problems, but John usually handled them all for me while I did other things. I would name you Hand of the King, remarked Robert after paying his respects to Lyanna in the crypt and refused to say what the other things were in her presence. As Hand of the King, I will do what I can, your grace. Though I don't think I'm worthy of the title and rank you honor me with, said Ned before kneeling, and Robert scoffed at him. Get on your damn feet, Ned. I'm not trying to honor you. I'm trying to get you to run my kingdom while I eat, drink, and whore my way to an early grave, said Robert with a small smile before it became a frown, and glanced at Naruto, who had kept silent during this whole event. Considering the state of himself, it's a distinct possibility of that happening sooner rather than later, thought Naruto before glancing at Ned and gave a brief nod. You helped me win the Iron Throne, now help me keep the damn thing. We were meant to rule together. Complications just prevented it back then. We were young and still strong men. Damn it, Ned, if your sister had lived we would have been bound in blood. Still, it's not too late for that. I have a boy, you have a daughter around his age. We can still join our houses together before we're too old and die to see it happen, offered Robert with Ned thinking it over, but a quick glance from Naruto shaking his head with a think about it later look before shooting a glance over at the king. It is a great honor to be sure, and I will talk to my wife about it first and with a great deal of thought before making a final decision in the near future, Robert. However, one of the things I wanted to discuss was you, is in fact my appointment as Hand of the King. You see, my wife actually assumed you would make me the hand after John Aaron's death. As such, I will need some leeway from you regarding one of the things I need to do in order to fulfill my duties, said Ned while Robert now focused back on him. What leeway? You're the fucking Hand of the King. Short of putting my foot down on an issue, you can do just about any fucking thing you want, exclaimed Robert before narrowing his eyes suspiciously and glanced again over at Naruto. The leeway I'm speaking of is to allow me to enlist Naruto to aid me during my time in King's Landing as the Hand, said Ned while Robert looked livid at his request. No, never, no fucking way will I allow this dragon lover to enter King's Landing ever again. Not after he allowed the Mad King's own 7 damn children to escape my brother's fleet, exclaimed Robert angrily while glaring at Naruto. And Elia Martell and her children. But you don't need to know that, thought Naruto with a small hint of amusement, and wondered if the man would literally explode with rage at hearing such a thing. At most, he'd probably have a heart attack, but Naruto could save his life, provided the man didn't try to have him killed, or imprisoned soon after. They were children, Robert. Innocent children, stated Ned angrily since he had this one conversation beforehand. They were and are Targaryens. The only good Targaryens are dead ones, stated Robert angrily as he huffed and puffed, but stopped to look at Lyanna before calming down. I need Naruto with me in King's Landing. You know I do. You want me to be the Hand of the King and I will accept, but only if you allow him to aid me in my duties and my own personal quest to find out who killed John Aaron, said Ned with Robert frowning at him. Killed John Aaron? The man died of natural causes, said Robert in confusion. John's wife says differently. She sent a letter to Kat shortly following your own and says he was killed by the Lannisters. Possibly over a damaging secret they want kept hidden, said Ned before showing Robert the message. The ranting and ravings of a deeply crazed and paranoid woman. Her son is now what, 6 years old? And she still has him sucking on her tits for milk. Besides, even if what she said was true, which is a big if, why would they kill John? It's too risky even for them, and the Lannisters gain nothing from his death, and we all know the Lannisters would only do something like this to gain something else back in return without being connected to it, countered Robert since he knew how Tywin and House Lannister worked in terms of their actions. You don't think they would do this because normally they do such a thing for monetary or political advantages over their rivals. But what if this wasn't to gain an advantage, but to prevent something else entirely from happening? Questioned Naruto at last while he saw Robert scowling at him. And what would they be preventing with John Aaron's death after all these years? If anything, after I legitimized Ned's former bastard. I thought Cersei would hire a small army of assassins to kill your boy Ned. She bitched at me day and night for that, said Robert, since he had gotten quite an earful from Cersei on the issue. That I do not know, Robert. But deep down you know Jon's death was suspicious. I may not have been King's Landing when it happened, but my instincts tell me it was foul play, and whether the Lannisters are involved or not, we owe it to Jon to find out. He raised us both when we're just children. I want to honor and protect his memory, Robert. I want to find whoever killed him, if he was killed, and bring the murder or murders to justice, said Ned while Robert sighed and looked over at Lyanna's statue again. You are right. Jon was a good man. The best surrogate father an old drunken fool like me could ever have had in life. When I became king, I instantly knew he was the perfect man for the job at hand. I would have appointed you, but the North required a Stark stay there, and your brother had taken the Black, so he couldn't rule over the North in your place. A Stark must always be in Winterfell and the North to rule over it. That's the old saying, right? Now that 2 of your sons are full grown, it seems the gods have seen fit to give me a younger and stronger hand capable of helping me run the kingdom. All the while, the North has a young able Stark to replace you, said Robert with Ned nodding, but saw the king wasn't happy with the sage being a part of their group when returning to King's Landing. I know you don't like Naruto for his past actions, Robert, but for Lyanna's soul, for Jon's soul, and our friendship, I ask you let the grudge against him go, said Ned with Robert waving his hand in a gesture saying he would let it go reluctantly. Do what you have to do, Ned. I will do what I do best when I don't like how things turn out. You best have your servants bring out the finest wine in your cellar. I think I'm going to actually drink myself to death this time, replied Robert while walking out of the crypt without another word on the matter. Well, that went as expected, remarked Naruto with his arms crossed in front of him with his monk staff in hand. Though I suggest keeping clear of Robert tonight when the feast begins. Even more when the wine starts being poured. Things will be said by him that he won't take back, said Ned in a warning to Naruto, who shrugged. Robert's words don't and won't bother me, Ned. I have heard them all before since I was a child. It's nothing new to me, said Naruto before patting the man on the shoulder and walked out of the crypt. Winterfell Dining Hall. The festivities were soon underway and the feast was brought out for all to eat and enjoy with plenty of wine to go around. Robert was already halfway drunk and his arm around the waist of a girl he intended to no doubt bed later on. Much to his wife's ire at seeing him already in the mood to break his oath to be faithful to her yet again for what felt like the 100th time this month alone. Off to the side, she saw Jaime was standing guard, as was his duty, and noticed their little brother Tyrion, who she hated with a deep dark passion, was nowhere to be found. No doubt the little monster went to a brothel after acquiring some wine in his skin for the long walk over to one, thought Cersei angrily, since she would have loved to have him be a target for her drunk husband to speak about in a humiliating way in front of the Starks. Inwardly, Cersei hated Winterfell. She hated the North, always cold, always windy to further make the cold bite her skin harder than usual. Barbarians, the whole lot of them, with the need for animal fur to stay warm and living off the land for what food they can get in the process. Why would anyone want to live here and enjoy it? Catelyn Stark was truly an oddball for living here in Winterfell. She didn't understand how a woman from Riverrun would want to leave a moderately warm place for this cold abysmal land here in the north. Of course, it might have been due to Cersei living a life of luxury at Castle Rock in the west, and being the daughter of Tywin Lannister that prevented her from seeing the truth. Still, the woman's pride as a Lannister, and wanting to be waited on every day as queen, was no doubt another thing blinding her from the truth. Glancing over at her children, she saw Joffrey talking with Sansa Stark, and trying to woo the girl with his boyish charms. On one hand, the Cersei was happy for her eldest child taking an interest in a girl as pretty as Sansa. It showed he didn't have any weird tastes like Robert's youngest brother Renly, who was rumored to have other tastes, and all centered around men of the Reach. But at the same time, the Wood Witch Maggie the Frog appeared in her mind with those words about the new, more beautiful queen taking over, and casting Cersei down from her position of power. Added to the fact her children would all die before her one by one did not help in matters either, since she didn't know how they would die. Stabbing? Poisoning? Whatever the source, Cersei was not about to have her children die before her, or this new queen take the Iron Throne along with the power that came with it. She wouldn't allow that. Outside the great dining hall of Winterfell, one Jon Stark was practicing with his sword, and found himself improving greatly every day. He sparred with his brother, Rob, and the two were nearly evenly matched. Both men knew the truth behind John's parentage, as Ned felt Rob should know as well as John so the two could have the other's back when in trouble. Rob instantly understood why John's heritage had been kept a secret, since he had heard the stories behind his aunt's kidnapping and death at the Tower of Joy had sent Robert into a rage. Add what happened to Elia Martell and her children simply for being with the Targaryens by blood and marriage, with King Robert approving of the actions leading up to their deaths, all the more reason to protect Jon from harm. At least until Robert's hatred for the Targaryens died with him. Impressive, Jon. Very impressive, remarked Naruto while walking over to the young man with wolf and dragon's blood in his veins. Thank you, great sage, replied Jon, since he didn't know how else to address the masked man in front of him and felt it best to use his title in terms of giving out proper respect. Just call me Naruto. A sage I may be, but great I am most certainly not, replied Naruto with amusement in his voice, and Jon let out a chuckle. Not to be direct, but is it true how you vanquished so many of your enemies? With your magic and different swords? Asked Jon, with Naruto cocking his head slightly to the right for a second. I see the bards still sing my name and deeds in the rebellions after all this time. You would think they had other tales to tell in brothels and bars. But to answer your question, yes, I did kill several thousand people with one swing of my sword, replied Naruto, with Jon looking at him in awe. How is such a thing possible? Asked Jon almost immediately. Training, dear boy. Lots and lots of intense bone-breaking training with a long lifespan beyond what any mortal man in existence has today to match, answered Naruto with a hint of sadness in them, since he had seen all his loved ones die out and missed them each one dearly. Could you teach me? Nothing magical, mind you, but maybe some of the skills that made you such a great swordsman? Asked Jon, while hoping the man would say yes and he could get Rob in on this later before the man went off with Ned to King's Landing. I don't see why not. So long as you are not going to ask me to give you any of my power or something like that. Roose Bolton already tried that years ago along with his bastard son Ramsay. And we all know what happened to their house, said Naruto before putting his staff down and went to the sword rack. I wouldn't dream of it, said Jon with a smile, since he doubted his body could handle such power or he was worthy of being given it in the first place. Good, let's begin, said Naruto while the two now circled the other and slowly drawing in a crowd. Jon moved first after a while. He deduced rather quickly enough that Naruto wasn't going to make the first move, so making the first move was the only thing Jon could do at this point. The strike was instantly blocked and pushed back by Naruto with incredible ease and strength in his right hand, currently holding the training sword against the real one Jon possessed. Motioning for Jon to try again, the young wolf did so, and the two had begun their little dance with the weapon of choice they possessed. The crowd around the two of them had gotten bigger, some people even placing bets and cheering both duelists on. The sage is good, very good. I'm starting to sweat and he's not even breathing hard or looking tired from fighting. I could increase my skill from this one spar alone than if I sparred with Rob in 20. I need to remind myself to have Rob fight him and see where we both stand in terms of skill level, thought Jon before he began to fight Naruto again, and yet the sage still held his ground with a seemingly unbreakable defense. You're trying too hard now. Your moves are getting more desperate. More sloppy. Calm your mind, Jon. Focus, commanded Naruto while seeing Jon was beginning to tire from this fight with him. Nodding at Naruto's words, the young legitimized Stark attacked him once again, but his movements were more fluid and precise this time. One person gasped when they thought Jon had nearly nicked the mask Naruto wore, but it was blocked by the sage at the last moment, and the man himself nodded in respect at having someone so close do that. Of course, Naruto was holding back a great deal of his strength and skill, but it was most impressive for one so young to do that without chakra helping to give him an edge. Enough. The match is a draw, though respectfully I think the sage is winner. Anyone with a sharp mind and eye can tell he was holding back, said Roderick while seeing Jon wipe the sweat off his brow, while Naruto just shrugged and didn't bother denying it. While true, Jon's got the skills to become a great swordsman. I bet the same could be said for Rob if I had a chance to test his own skills against me, said Naruto, since he had heard the two were nearly equal when it came to their skills using a sword. I must say that was impressive, great sage. Indeed, the bard's songs and stories of your skills do not do you justice. They should be flogged mercilessly for their inept failure to capture the description of your strength, said a voice near waist level, and the three of them saw one Tyrion Lannister looking up at them with a smile on his face. Thank you for the compliment, Tyrion Lannister, son of Tywin Lannister. Though I do wish you would keep the comment about the bards being flogged to yourself. I don't want anyone to get any ideas of punishing them simply because their stories are not up to the standards of others, said Naruto, with Tyrion nodding, with his smile increasing since he wasn't being imp or dwarf for his short size. Indeed, a humble man with such power is practically unheard of, but I will respect your wishes all the same. If only because you don't refer to me in the imp and address me as myself. And as for you, you must be Ned Stark's former bastard, said Tyrion, with Jon frowning a bit, but not at all the same. I was a former bastard. I haven't been one for some time now, thanks to my father. Why do you want to know? Said Jon, with Tyrion nodding and giving the young man a once-over. No real reason. I can see why he made you legitimate. Your features are clearly that of a Stark in every sense of the word. Not many Lannisters have been known to sire bastards, and if they do, the women and the child in question don't receive the loving treatment you have with your own. Even if the bastards we Lannisters have produced have shown some promise of great potential. My advice to you is to milk this for all it's worth, like a baby sucking on his mother's big tits before she weans him off it, said Tyrion, since he knew the only reason he wasn't labeled one was due to his father being Tywin Lannister, and the man knew the sad, painful truth. That the creature for a baby, who killed Tywin's wife when bringing this deformed man into the world years ago, now currently standing in front of these two, was his son. Tywin knew without question his wife had been faithful to him and never strayed to lay with another man. It was that reason, and that reason alone, that he accepted Tyrion as his son, despite the fact he was a dwarf with his deformed body causing the woman to die from blood loss. Cersei had made it clear almost immediately that she had wanted Tyrion dead from the moment news came to her of their mother's death, and her recently born little brother was the cause of it. Jaime had easily stopped such a thing at every turn, since he didn't blame his little brother for it. Women died from such things all the time, whether they gave birth to deformed babies or not. Birthing complications didn't distinguish between themselves from queens, ladies, or small folk women. They simply happened one way or another. I will keep those words close to my heart, Lord Lannister, said Jon respectfully, though he was a little put off by the crude words mingled in with them. Jon, go inside and get something to eat and drink before the king devours it all. I wish to talk to Tyrion for a moment, said Naruto, with Jon nodding before heading inside to eat with the rest of the family. I'm surprised someone such as yourself wishes to have any kind of conversation with me. Normally, people tend to avoid my presence like they do a plague. Unless of course it's in a brothel with a whore and my coin purse is swollen with gold dragons when I do, commented Tyrion, as he heard Naruto chuckle, and found the sage to be an interesting fellow to be sure. Well, I am no whore for one thing. Second, I'm not here for the gold dragons you may or may not still have from your visits to the brothels near here. Third, my reason for talking to you revolves around your family, replied Naruto, with him retrieving his staff and seeing Tyrion's smile leave him a bit. And what does a sage with your reputation like yourself wish to know about my family? Wishing to offer your services to my house for a fee? While my family is considered the wealthiest in all of Westeros, I doubt even we could afford your services, said Tyrion, while Naruto just shrugged before sitting down on a nearby bench. No, nothing like that, I assure you. I wish to ask about your father and your siblings. I wish to know more about them, and you are the only honest Lannister by far, despite your reputation for drinking and whoring, answered Naruto, with Tyrion raising an eyebrow at him since he wasn't expecting that. I'm pretty sure you have met my father before now during both Robert's Rebellion and the Greyjoy Rebellion. So the real questions you wish to ask me surround my siblings and what they are like outside of their daily lives of the people, deduced Tyrion, since he was still quite sober right now and his mind was sharp enough to know enough about the man to know a feint for a question when asked. Smart man. Though I do have one question or two about your father, the real questions are about your siblings, said Naruto, while impressed with Tyrion's mind being so sharp. I'll be happy to answer any and all questions about them, no matter how embarrassing or humiliating it might be for them in the future, replied Tyrion in a cheeky tone. Winter fell the next day. Naruto watched as Ned and Robert went off to hunt with a combination of Kingsguard, Stark, and Lannister men beside them. Watching intently as the two men talked while they set out to hunt deer, boar, or whatever else they found. Tyrion had provided him further insight into Cersei, Jaime, and above all else Tywin Lannister in terms of just how far they would go to get their way. Tyrion, despite being a Lannister heir, the only one left legally capable of being Tywin's heir to Castle Rock at this point, held no such ambition, or rather one that didn't involve backstabbing or killing people to achieve his goals. Tyrion did have the ambition, but it was more for acknowledgement, and being considered more than just the Lannister imp. To be known beyond the stain of being the proverbial black sheep of the family, though it was amusing to think of Lannisters as sheep in the first place since the House Sigil told him otherwise. Glancing to his right, Naruto saw Bran was climbing the old tower once again. No doubt wanting to see his father and the king riding off before they were consumed by the forest where all the game was located. Indeed, Bran Stark was every bit like his ancestor Bran the Builder, and knew the boy would do wonderful things in the future. Sensing himself being watched, Naruto turned to his left to see Arya staring at him with a scowl on her face. She did a lot of that lately. No doubt because her mother kept having her learn to do all the things a proper lady would do, and that wasn't Arya. She liked the idea of using swords over playing with dolls. She liked the idea of playing the mud over learning how to sew. Arya was a tomboy in every sense of the world. Are you really a sage? And can use magic? And wield weapons capable of killing well over 1,000 men? Asked Arya in rapid succession. In order? Yes, yes, and yes. Why? Wish to become a student of mine? Asked Naruto curiously with a hint of amusement in his voice. Would you teach me how to use magic? Asked Arya, since she would enjoy using it to play all sorts of pranks on her siblings. Mainly Sansa. No, replied Naruto with Arya frowning heavier now. What about how to wield a sword? Asked Arya, since she wanted to use them like her brothers, but her mother put a stop to that. I could, but I won't, replied Naruto with Arya scowling heavier. Why not? Is it because I'm a girl? Because you are like everyone else and believe only boys and men can wield swords? Asked Arya with a sense of anger and impatience at being told no by everyone because what she wanted to do was considered unbefitting someone of her gender. No, of course not. I'm not going to teach you because you are not ready to learn from me yet. You need to learn how to crawl before you can walk, and you need to walk before learning how to run. It's the same way with swordsmanship in general. You need to have a competent teacher to learn the basics before I even consider teaching you how to use a sword, replied Naruto with Arya's scowl lessening slightly. But no one will teach me how to use a sword. My mother won't allow it, and the others here won't out of fear of my father punishing them, replied Arya, though her father did give her more leeway since she reminded him a lot of Lyanna when growing up and not being as girly as other womenfolk had been. That's not exactly accurate. It's more like the instructor you need isn't here at Winterfell to teach you, answered Naruto with Arya's scowl returning. Where would I find one? Asked Arya with Naruto thinking it over in his head for a brief second. My guess would be in King's Landing. It is a central hub for everything and anything one could want for the right price. As your father is now the new hand of the king, he can get you just about anything King's Landing possesses, within reason. You would have to talk to him first, but I'm sure he would be able to acquire a proper instructor, said Naruto with Arya thinking it over in her mind before nodding. Do you have any students still alive? Asked Arya curiously. Oh, I have taught a few over the years. Most of them are dead now. But they taught quite a few students of their own. Some became Bravasi swordsmen who use what is called the water dance and meant to use precision over brute strength. Something I find to be the best way to fight your enemy, since anyone can pick up a sword and fling it around to hurt someone. I also taught Esser Barristan Selmy in his younger years, answered Naruto to Arya's shock. Esser Barristan Selmy? Also known as Barristan the Bold? Of the Kingsguard? Asked Arya in shock with Naruto nodding. The very same. How do you think a man his age is still considered the best swordsman in all of the 7 kingdoms? He was a boy when I first taught him. Born from a minor house, he had wanted to do something grand with his life. To serve some higher cause and wield a sword to protect the realm of men with all of his being. I respected him for his beliefs and having them at such a young age. So I trained him. In fact, he became my very last student. Even now I'm proud of him. Not once has Esser Barristan swayed from his convictions and kept his oath to serve the king sitting on the throne despite the last one not being of sound mind, replied Naruto with Arya looking shocked that one of the Kingsguard had been taught by the sage himself. I heard from my father that Roose Bolton wanted to have Esser Barristan executed, but was pardoned, and became the Lord Commander, said Arya since she had her father tell her stories of the knights and warriors who fought during Robert's Rebellion and Greyjoy Rebellion. That is true. Your father and Robert respected Esser Barristan, so they felt a man of his station showing such loyalty was to be rewarded. Not punished, replied Naruto, with Arya looking more impressed by this. If you had been in King's Landing and faced Esser Barristan, would you have fought and killed him? Asked Arya curiously, and Naruto had a faraway look in his eyes. I was in King's Landing, my dear, and I fought quite a few Kingsguard, but I made sure never to encounter my old student during the fighting. Not because I feared his strength and skill with a sword, but rather the outcome should we have clashed. If I did face him, then yes, I would have fought Esser Barristan. Killed him? I couldn't answer that until I had the sword poised to make such a strike, answered Naruto before he looked to his right and saw Bran falling from the tower and quickly used Kamui to appear below where he was falling to catch the boy. Unfortunately, the poor boy had hit his head somewhere along the tower, and had lost any form of consciousness. Beside him, the dire wolf growled at him, but a quick look from Naruto silenced the animal into submission. Arya, having seen him act to catch Bran, quickly ran to get her mother, and tell her what happened. Moving swiftly, Naruto heads to the boy's bedroom, after asking a servant its location, to place him there, and was soon met by a worried Stark family with Bran's mother at the forefront. Bran, wake up my son, my child, please wake up, pleaded Caitlyn while she was held back by Robb and Jon while Naruto gave him a once-over. It's a good thing I caught him. The fall would have most likely broken his back and he would have been crippled for life, whispered Naruto while using his skills to heal the boy's head injury. Will my son be okay when he wakes up? Asked Caitlyn while Naruto nodded. A bit sore with a headache. But that's to be expected, even when I finish healing him of his head injury. Curious though, remarked Naruto with a frown and his eyes narrowed. What? Asked Robb since he saw the sage's eyes narrow. This head injury wasn't caused by the rock of the tower from one falling and hitting it on the way down. The force behind the blow is too strong. Someone grabbed his head and slammed it into the rock before throwing him off the tower. Most likely from the top of the tower where the window is located. Meaning someone pushed him, surmised Naruto, with the Starks in the room looked shocked. Someone tried to kill my son? Why? Who would do such a thing? Asked Caitlyn while a sense of dread filled her in the belief it was one of the Lannisters or their men. Robb, get Esser Roderick and a few capable men. Go to the top of the tower where Bran was climbing and look for clues. Take your dire wolves if you must. They might be able to find the scent of the person or persons responsible for this action, commanded Ned, with Robb nodding and motioned for Jon to follow since they had the two best trained dire wolves of their entire family. Do you think Bran will remember who pushed him when he awakens? Asked Caitlyn with Naruto looking unsure. Maybe. Even with my healing his head injury, the boy might have memory loss. A few minutes, hours, maybe the entire day at most will be lost to him. Images and faces of the moment before the fall could be hazy. If words were spoken, he may not recall them, or who spoke them. I can only heal the injury. I cannot heal the memory. Whatever he does try to recall will seem more like a dream than a memory, replied Naruto before putting his hand away and smiled behind his mask at seeing the boy was now sleeping now rather than being in a coma. When will he awaken? Asked Caitlyn while hoping it would be soon. In a day or two. I healed the injury, but his mind will wait until it feels it's ready, and considers the injury healed enough that it's safe for Bran to open his eyes, answered Naruto calmly while seeing Bran's still unnamed dire wolf sit on the bed and watching everyone in the room carefully. I want 2 guards posted at the door. Bran's dire wolf can stay as a last line of defense in case someone tries to harm him. I'm staying here with Bran. If anyone tries to harm my son, they will have to go through me as well, said Caitlyn while sitting in a chair beside Bran and held her son's hand. Maester Luwin wanted to protest, but Naruto put his hand on the man's shoulder and shook his head no to anything he planned to say. Let her stay, Luwin. Besides, a headstrong Tully woman is someone you can win against in any argument. Especially one protecting her son from possible threats. You would have a better chance getting the White Walkers to bend the knee to us, said Naruto, with Luwin letting out a small laugh at that since it was true. With a nod to the woman, Naruto left the family talk, and prepare additional defenses for their home against whoever violated the sanctity of Winterfell. Hours soon passed and Ned returned with Robert from a good hunt, only to be hit hard by the news of Bran falling from the tower. Catelyn didn't dare risk telling Ned the truth with Robert and his escort around. As for Naruto, he made his way into the courtyard where some horses were out near the stable, but were resting comfortably. Near them was Sandor Clegane and Crown Prince Joffrey Baratheon being talked to by Tyrion over something. "My mother has been looking for you. We ride for King's Landing today," said Joffrey in his usual whining sound for a voice. "Before you go, you will call on Lord and Lady Stark and offer your sympathies," said Tyrion, since he knew all about proper etiquette from his father, who drilled it into all three of his children's skulls, and oddly enough only his youngest truly embracing it. Ironic considering the only one who listened was also the one most despised by Tywin himself. Cersei felt she could do just about whatever she wanted in life simply because she was a Lannister, the daughter of Tywin Lannister to be exact, and then later as Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Jaime felt no one would do anything to him simply because he was good with a sword, had a certain wit about him, and a charm that made women spread their legs for him if he wanted it. And despite his oaths taken when being a Kingsguard, he had done just that. "What good will my sympathies do them?" asked Joffrey to his uncle in confusion. "None, but it is to be expected. Your absence has already been noted," remarked Tyrion, as he was sure it wasn't, but Joffrey didn't know that, and even if he did, the boy's father would know before smacking his son over the head with a metal gauntlet-covered fist. "That boy who fell means nothing to me. Besides, I can't stand the wailing of women," said Joffrey with a grin while glancing up at the Hound like the man should be impressed with his decision. Only to be slapped in the face by Tyrion, who was not amused by his nephew's idiocy. "One more word like that and I will hit you," stated Tyrion with a frown, and saw out of the corner of his eye that even the Hound was impressed by the dwarf's sudden boldness in hitting the prince right in the face. "I'm telling mother," whined Joffrey in a way that every spoiled child whines when they don't get their way and hide behind the parent who spoils them rotten. "Go ahead, tell her, boy. Tell her how you show no sympathy or respect for the Lord of Winterfell, who was just recently made Hand of the King, over the near death of their second young son. A boy, who if left this world for the next would have been unable to use his wonderful mind to make and build new innovative things that would one day benefit the world as a whole. I also like to see you complain to her while in the presence of your father," remarked Naruto while walking up to the group and interrupting what would surely been the second hit aimed at Joffrey's face by Tyrion. Though Naruto felt a second strike was deserved. "I won't forget this," whined Joffrey before he took off running with his face red with embarrassment at being humiliated like this by his own uncle, the sage, and in front of the Hound no less. "The prince will remember that, little lord," mumbled the Hound to Tyrion, since he knew the boy had a long memory of those who unknowingly or knowingly crossed him. "He's lucky I didn't hit him as well. I would have hit the brat with enough force to make him lose a few teeth, if not break his nose in the process," remarked Naruto while looking back at where Joffrey had gone and frowned in thought. "It was a good lesson for him. If he forgets, be a good dog and remind him," said Tyrion in a mocking fashion towards Sandor before walking off. "While it was supposed to be a good lesson for the spoiled brat, I doubt Joffrey is the kind of student who listens to his teachers unless they share the same interest," said Naruto to the Hound, who nodded slowly and glancing around for any Lannister men who may have seen the altercation. The boy needs a good beating. His father once gave him one such a beating when younger for killing a pregnant cat. It was actually the one that belonged to the little Prince Tommen during his infant years, so the boy doesn't remember it much," said Sandor, as he wished his own father had defended him from Gregor when his older brother burned his face over a toy. Sadly, nothing happened. It seemed even their own father feared Gregor too much to do anything to the future mountain that rides when they were just children. "That boy is messed up in the head. There is something in his mind that's broke inside. A budding madness to be sure. Better keep an eye on him, Sandor. If I'm truly right about him, then killing pregnant cats, and the lack of respect to high lords is just the scratch beneath the surface that is Prince Joffrey Baratheon," said Naruto before walking off with Sandor Clegane looking at him in surprise at being called his actual name and not dog or hound, like so many others did. He didn't even realize his head moved to nod at the request until the sage was gone. Winterfell Great Dining Hall. Breakfast was served on time for everyone who entered. If there was one thing about the North that even Cersei could respect were servants who were on time with food. And while she loathed to admit it, even to herself, some of the food was actually better than what was in King's Landing, and what the servants at Castle Rock had ever made for her when growing up as a child. It was just one more thing she hated about the North. About the Starks. About the Tullys. Everything that wasn't Lannister, herself, Jaime, or her 3 beautiful children by blood. Tyrion being the exception and didn't count in her eyes. Joffrey being everything she had come to nurture in him about what it meant to be a Lannister. Not Baratheon. Let Robert have his whores, his small army of bastard children, and the memory of Lyanna Stark. She had Jaime. She had Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella. She didn't need anyone else. Nor did she want anyone else. Ah, sister dear. It's so good to see you this morning. Hello brother. My dear niece and nephew, said Tyrion after walking into the hall and snagging some bacon from young Tommen's plate. Little brother. You're cheerful this morning considering where you slept last night, said Jaime with Tyrion shrugged. I have slept in worse places, commented Tyrion with a shrug, and truth be told, he had slept in worse following a night of intense drinking. Is Bran going to die? I heard he fell and hurt himself, said Myrcella, since she liked Bran and had talked with him while they pet his dire wolf and trying to think up names for it. Oh no, he'll be fine, said Tyrion in a confident tone, and missed the brief look of worry on Cersei's face that mirrored Jaime's for that same moment. What do you mean? Asked Cersei while still sounding tired, so Tyrion would assume she didn't understand his answer. Well, luckily, it just so happened from what one of the servants told me before I walked in here. The sage was walking about, and talking to Arya Stark when it happened. He saw Bran fall and caught him before the poor boy hit the ground. Not only is the Bran alive, but he is not paralyzed from the waist down, thank the gods. The poor boy would have been crippled if the fall didn't kill him, answered Tyrion calmly, with his siblings more worried than ever. And the boy's memory? Did the sage say anything about what the boy may or may not remember? Asked Jaime with Tyrion shrugged. From what the servants told me, the poor boy will have some kind of memory loss. A minute here, an hour there, maybe the whole day at worst. But he will have full function of his mental faculties thanks to the sage using his power to reduce the swelling in Bran's head in time, said Tyrion while eating some more food and drinking wine. And when is the boy expected to awaken? Asked Cersei while trying to keep her voice neutral in terms of tone. Later today or tomorrow. Still, the Starks for some reason feel foul play was involved, and have posted guards at his door with the boy's mother at his bedside. I pity the fool who thinks they can challenge a protective mother and a Tully of all things, said Tyrion, with the last part being a joke, and laughed. All the while completely forgetting to mention the fact Bran had his dire wolf in the room for added security before talking about going to the wall to see the grand structure made by Bran the Builder. Cersei of course didn't want his foul mouth to infect her children by having them repeating his words to others and make them seem uncivilized. To that end, she took them out of the grand hall with Jaime eating some more before joining her. Later that day, I can't believe you pushed the boy out the window. And not only did he live following the fall, but that damn sage healed his head wound you gave him. Now he might wake up and tell everyone what he saw, exclaimed Cersei worriedly while pacing back and forth. She was so close to getting her son on the throne. A few more months of having to put up with her drunken pig of a husband, and when the time was right, she would have her trusted agent make his move to put the man out of her misery. If Robert ever found out she was not only fucking her own brother, her twin brother no less, he would have her killed. Worse, if he found out all 3 of her children did not have one drop of Baratheon blood in them, they would either be killed, or sent up to the wall where death would be merciful by comparison. Relax, he's a 10-year-old boy. Whatever he tells them will make no sense in their eyes, and they will see it as a weird perverted dream of a growing boy. Besides, I already took care of things to ensure the Stark child doesn't say anything. Soon our agent will make his move and silence the boy before he can awaken, said Jaime calmly while Cersei looked concerned by this news. What do you mean? What did you do? Questioned Cersei with Jaime shrugging. I just had one of our men from House Lannister take care of things after we leave this cold and disgusting place. I normally have one on call in the event someone might have seen us when we fuck, answered Jaime without a hint of remorse in his voice or eyes. And this man can be trusted? How do you know he doesn't know our secret too? Asked Cersei worriedly. The only thing the man knows is he's being paid to silence anyone who sees me fucking a woman. He also knows I pay himself well enough not to know who the woman is that I'm fucking, said Jamie with Cersei still not being convinced. Kill the man after you pay him. Make it seem like it was some kind of deal gone wrong. The few who know of our indiscretions the better, said Cersei while glad she had been able to get to her room and sprayed herself with some new perfume after her time with Jamie in that tower. It successfully sent those damn dire wolves off her scent and trail when they picked up what went on in that damn tower. She had to spray some perfume lightly on Jamie's own armor carefully in certain places to make everyone believe he was outside of her room when Bran fell. But in a way to make everyone believe he was only guarding her body. Not fucking it. Fine with me, I was going to do it anyway. He was asking for a bit more money and was no doubt getting suspicious of who the lucky woman was. If the Stark guards don't kill him trying to get to the boy, I will do it myself, replied Jamie with his usually charming smile. Neither saw a single black inky-looking mouse hearing their entire discussion before it had heard enough and rushed off. Winterfell elsewhere. Naruto knew something was off after he recovered Bran from his fall at the old tower the boy loved to climb. The injury the boy suffered was someone grabbing him from behind his head and slamming it hard against the stone surface before giving the stunned child a push. An inspection of the tower by Robb, Jon, their dire wolves, and a few Stark men specializing in tracking had investigated the area. Aside from a single stand of blonde hair, there was no real evidence saying Bran had been pushed. When news had reached Robert after returning from the hunt, the man exploded with rage at the idea of his dear friend's son nearly being killed. Naruto had assured both Robert and a worried Ned there were some leads, but nothing definite. He only asked for both men to show patience and know Bran was recovering with his memory of the event, possibly returning so he could identify his attacker. But Naruto had no intention of waiting to see if the boy remembered what happened and the dire wolves had lost the trail when a new scent had invaded their noses. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide who they were and what they did before Bran got there to see it too. Judging from what the dire wolves smelled along with the northern trackers themselves, two people were up there going at it, you ally, and for quite a while before the two individuals saw Bran and were discovered. So with foul play clearly being shown, a hunt was on for the attackers, and find out why they tried to silence Bran. So Naruto decided to focus on finding out who was where within the walls of Winterfell at the time of the incident. He had suspicions on a few people, but his interrogation of them, which they would never remember in the slightest, revealed they were innocent, and thus the investigation started to narrow down the suspects. Joffrey himself was such a suspect, but the brat was actually innocent for once, as the Hound had been with him every step of the way, and not even the giant of a man was going to let the prince do such an act on his watch. So with the spoiled prince and his siblings cleared of any and all wrongdoing here, the sage of ancient forgotten arts in the ways of chakra searched for other possible criminals capable of the crime. If children did not hurt Bran, and given what clearly happened when the boy had made it to the top of the tower, the culprits were clearly adults. Meaning he was looking for two adults who smelled off from all others in Winterfell. So Naruto had followed the dire wolves from the shadows and inspected the hair found within the tower, which helped narrow down the list of suspects by far to those with blonde hair. It was actually one of the reasons he suspected Joffrey until his alibi checked out and the hair itself being too long for it to belong to the spoiled shit. And it was feminine in nature, so the hair belonged to a woman given the perfume scent behind it. Which meant it was a blonde-haired woman, who had clearly done something with someone she wasn't supposed to be doing. And since Myrcella was too young to be doing any such thing with anyone, it left only one blonde-haired woman within Winterfell at the moment. Cersei Lannister. So with that in mind, Naruto traced Cersei's movements for the day, and found it strange her scent had a strong presence of newly applied perfume. Cersei may have understood the principle of throwing people and hounds off your scent by masking it with other types of chemicals like perfume. Given how she had to hide it from dire wolves just showed the Lannister woman was sharp and quick to act in throwing suspicion off of her. But Naruto had invaded Inuzuka hounds and Inuzuka clan members in general since he could walk thanks to his pranks back during the days of old as a child. He was attuned with nature and could see, hear, and smell things where others could not. As such, Cersei's attempt to hide things from him were amateurish at best. In fact, such a description was generous on his end, and only considered as such given how Cersei had sprayed some of it on Jaime to make her story seem true on where she was at the time of Bran's near-death experience. But Naruto knew otherwise. He knew a liar when he saw one, and Cersei was the definition of a liar, just as Gregor Clegane was the definition of a cruel, heartless goat fucker who should have been killed before he learned how to walk. So with one suspect in mind and the other being Jamie as the one person she could turn to for covering up her actions in the tower, Naruto sent a little ink mouse to scurry about and follow Cersei around before everyone departed for King's Landing. If the news of Bran being alive and would awake frightened either sibling, they would react accordingly in some fashion, and the ink mouse he sent would record everything spoken before it ran back to give its report. Speaking of his little creation, there you are, my little inky spy. I wish Sai was around so I could thank him for leaving behind his understanding of using ink jutsus. Now get on this parchment and show me what you heard and put it into words, commanded Naruto, with a scroll being unrolled that was blank for the ink mouse to dive into with a nice splat. Before everything Jamie and Cersei said was written out word for word. Frowning, Naruto was somewhat surprised Cersei was having UAL relations with her twin brother Jamie. He had lived long enough to see the Targaryens embracing such a practice, as well as clans back during the days growing up, and learning about the ways of the world. But to this extent, not even the Targaryens went this far with inbreeding and incest relations in the belief of keeping the bloodline pure. Sure, they did it with brother and sister like these two had done, but they never did it with twins with identical DNA, and only the gender between them being different. Not only that, but there was the issue of Cersei's 3 children. Were they even Robert's by blood and therefore the rightful heirs to the throne? Joffrey was clearly not Robert's child, though Naruto suspected Robert couldn't see this because he was blinded by love for the late Lyanna Stark, his drinking, whoring, and not exactly in that order. Tommen and Myrcella were a coin toss. Tommen didn't really have anything that one could call Baratheon features, but he wasn't a psychotic mess like Joffrey clearly was, and had a gentle disposition to him. He might make a nice gentle king if Joffrey were to suddenly die and Robert named Tommen his heir, but it would just leave the boy a big fat target for all the snakes in King's Landing. His mother certainly wasn't going to help him be a great king and would only raise more problems to combat if it meant she could be by his side to control Tommen from the shadows. As for Myrcella, she clearly inherited her mother's childhood form, and would become a beautiful woman just like her mother. Naruto only hoped if Myrcella didn't inherit her mother's cruelty or hatred for all things not Lannister by blood. He liked to think Cersei's last 2 children had been saved from the sheer madness of the mind that Joffrey and the Targaryens themselves in the past had gained from the persistent tradition of inbreeding and incest. Though one cannot overlook the nurturing of madness by someone being factored into the nature of inheriting the madness genetically. In any case, Naruto would have to watch everything Lannister from here on out, and make sure they didn't do anything to endanger the 7 kingdoms in their current fragile state. Just because Robert was the king of all 7 kingdoms didn't mean he was a good king in keeping things stable. There was a lingering unrest within the different houses thought at all, and many of them were still secretly Targaryen supporters waiting for the fat and bloated stag to die from his many life-shortening vices. As for Dorne, Prince Doran had kept Elia Martell and her children from being discovered for years since King's Landing had been sacked. But Naruto was sure a certain spider for an eunuch living within King's Landing knew differently, and was keeping that tidbit of information in his back pocket to use at a later time for an emergency should his position become compromised. Not that the spider would ever reveal it to anyone, even if the man really wanted to, since Naruto was also a secret acquaintance of his for many years, and wouldn't allow it. Not without permission anyway. Both had done much in the shadows to keep the realm stable as a whole. Of course Varys had disillusions regarding how the current king ran the 7 kingdoms and knew Joffrey being on the throne would be far worse, to the point being the second coming of the Mad King. Naruto had agreed with him and felt the Targaryens were still the rightful rulers to the Iron Throne, provided of course they weren't crazy, and didn't want to burn every single thing in sight. So far, it didn't look good for the remaining members of House Targaryen. Viserys was showing signs of the madness even now from what Naruto knew of the boy. Thinking himself already as the king of the 7 kingdoms, who was simply untouchable on that principle alone, and was going to every person stupid enough to back him financially to fund his campaign to raise an army to take back his family legacy. Elia Martell's children were living happily in Dorne and was keeping her children out of the Game of Thrones in its entirety. All she wanted to do was live happily in Dorne with her children away from the horrifying seat of tyranny the Iron Throne was known for in the past. Not that Naruto blamed her. The Iron Throne really was a horrifying seat of tyranny and should have been destroyed by Robert to signify a new era without such means to rule being necessary. But that was neither here nor there. What Naruto needed to do was focus on certain lions licking their chops at the sight of the dying stag and getting ready to pounce. Personally, Naruto didn't care for Robert due to his whoring and drinking ways after the death of Lyanna Stark. The man was coping in all the wrong ways and in doing so made his wife spiteful to the point where she was clearly going to do something soon once Joffrey was old enough in her eyes to become king. A king she could manipulate, control, and one who will help ensure the power, if not the very lifestyle as a queen, never leaving her as time went by. Shaking his head at the thought, Naruto decided he would have to go to King's Landing and help Ned fix what was clearly broken there. Ned was a good man. A rarity these days given how people found it easier to be dishonorable and cruel over honorable and caring. As he headed outside, Naruto focused on seeing John inspecting a sword the blacksmith had made, and saw Jamie approach him with his usual arrogant smirk and walk. "A sword for the wall?" asked Jamie curiously at the sight of the weapon. "Already have one," replied John while keeping the identity of who this sword went to a very close guarded secret. "Good man, have you swung it yet?" asked Jamie while glancing at the sword on John's waist. "Of course I have," replied John, since he had been trained by his father at a young age to wield a sword and shown much promise. "I trust you find training with a real sword is much different than fighting with an actual one," commented Jamie while John put the sword away. "The Night's Watch has defended the North at the Wall for 800 years, replied John with Jamie raising an eyebrow. "Oh, planning on taking the black and saying your vows?" asked Jamie, since he was sure Cersei would find that soothing with one less wolf in the den to threaten the lion. "No, not yet. My father wants me to go to the wall and inspect it first before I make a decision. While he's serving his hand, I will be helping out at the wall to see what needs to be improved, and if necessary take the black to strengthen their numbers further. I will report my findings to my brother Robb and if necessary send a raven to my father to get further men sent up to the wall when he arrives at King's Landing," said John with Jamie frowning a bit since he was sure the former bastard would take the black at this point. "Give my regards to the Night's Watch, and if you do fail, it's only for life." "No pressure," said Jamie before walking away. "Don't listen to him, John. You won't fail in your duty. Whether as a member of the Night's Watch or as a member of House Stark. Trust your instincts and remember to do what is right, even if other people don't like it, and only if you believe in it," replied Naruto while John nodded in agreement. "I will. How did your sparring session with Robb go?" "He wouldn't tell me," asked John curiously, since the two had sparred earlier that morning before the issue with Bran had occurred. "Let us just say Robb now knows what it feels like to fight someone truly stronger than himself. It was a very humbling experience on his end. The last thing someone like you or Robb need right now is your egos getting so filled with hot air that they equal the size of Jaime Lannister," replied Naruto with John letting out a chuckle. "Thanks. Still, I wish the Kingslayer would be sent to the wall." "The only reason he isn't is because his family wouldn't allow it," remarked John with a hint of anger in his voice. "Yeah, but even if the man killed his king despite the oath he took, it was probably for the best that he did," said Naruto with John looking at him in surprise. "Why would you say that?" asked John with Naruto letting out a chuckle. "While I despise Jaime for the many things he's done in life, killing the Mad King is not one of them. What the Mad King wanted done before his fall would have left only ash in his wake, and all the people of King's Landing being part of it. Through Jaime's act of oath-breaking, he saved countless lives within King's Landing. You may dislike Jaime for what he did, but when you understand the reason behind it, I think deep down people would not call him Kingslayer with such disrespect," answered Naruto with John looking down for a second. "So you respect him?" asked John with Naruto shaking his head no. "Fuck no. I hate everything about the arrogant prick. The act he did to save the people in King's Landing from the Mad King is the only thing I do respect." "Nothing else," replied Naruto before looking at the sword John had taken from the blacksmith. "You like it? It's perfect for stabbing someone, provided the enemy on the receiving end is wearing little to no armor," remarked John while showing it to Naruto. "Not bad, though it is a bit small for a man to wield. but something tells me this isn't for a man or even a young boy. The handle here is designed for thin female fingers to hold onto it, surmised Naruto while appraising the sword in his hand. But don't tell my mother who it's for. Her wrath alone makes me want to take the black to avoid such a confrontation, whispered John with Naruto smirking behind his mask. Angry Tully women are truly a force of nature unto themselves. When do you intend to give the sword here to its new owner? Questioned Naruto with John smirking. Right before we leave. Said owner will have to hide it until she gets to King's Landing and father can provide her with a proper teacher. I still think you would be considered the best teacher for her in that regard. Many highborn lords would start a war simply for the honor, answered John while Naruto shook his head no. Which is why my last student is now the Lord Commander of the King's Guard and the best swordsman in all of the 7 kingdoms. Still, if Arya can find a teacher capable of bringing out a good foundation for me to work with, I might consider it. Though I make no promises, replied Naruto while the two walked into Arya's room and saw her packing for the trip to King's Landing. I thought you packed already? Questioned John with Arya huffing in slight anger. I had it all set for days, but now I have to fold them again. My things weren't properly folded, she says. Who cares how they are folded? They're going to get all messed up anyway, stated Arya in frustration while stuffing her clothing extra hard at the last part. Well, it's a good thing you have help, commented John while staring at Arya's dire wolf. Watch this. Nymeria, gloves, commanded Arya while Nymeria just sat there on the bed and looked bored. Impressive, remarked John with a smirk. Most impressive, added Naruto with a smirk of his own, but couldn't be seen by his mask. Shut up. Nymeria, gloves, commanded Arya with her dire wolf looking away. She probably doesn't want to be seen as a normal house-trained dog doing tricks, thought Naruto since he knew the dire wolf beside Arya was just as intelligent as the others of the pack. I have something for you. And it has to be packed carefully so it's not discovered by our mother, said John with Arya looking at him curiously. A present? Questioned Arya while John smiled and showed it to her. Something to take with us on the way to King's Landing. John had it made in secret since he knew your mother would not only disapprove, but never let it leave Winterfell in your hands, replied Naruto while John showed her the present in question. It's not a toy, Arya. Keep it tucked away until you're at King's Landing, said John while he showed her the thin pointy sword meant just for her. It's so skinny, commented Arya at the overall size of the sword. That's the point. Most swords are very heavy and thus most women lack the upper body strength to pick up, much less wield one. This was designed to stab people with pinpoint precision. You won't slice a person's head off, but given the right time and angle of the opening, you can definitely stab someone in a vital spot with it, if you are fast enough, added Naruto knowing that a needle to the neck can be just as deadly as an actual sword hitting the same spot. I can be quick, offered Arya enthusiastically since she was faster and more nimble than any of her brothers or sister. You will have to train every day with this. No slouching, no quitting. You want to be the best at something, you have to earn it, said Naruto in a stern voice, which made the girl nod, and knew she would do just that with the right instructor. I will. And I'll do it with this sword. This needle, stated Arya with Naruto smirking behind his mask. Interesting name for a sword, but I've heard worse. And it seems appropriate given its overall design. When we get to King's Landing, I will make sure your father finds a suitable instructor capable of teaching you, said Naruto knowing there were a few of them in King's Landing who could teach the girl and were more open-minded about women wielding a sword. And then you'll train me? Asked Arya while Naruto chuckled and John smirked. You are a persistent little she-wolf. Still, I won't make any promises to that effect. If you train hard and prove yourself, I just might. But don't take that as a guarantee, Arya. If and when I train you in using a sword will ultimately be up to me in the end, replied Naruto with the girl pouting at first, but ultimately accepting his answer since she was young and untrained in the ways of the sword. He wanted to see if her foundation with using needle from another teacher was worth the time in the future to train the girl himself. With that business taken care of, Naruto walked to the stables and saw Hodor preparing the horse for the sage. Giving a nod to the gentle giant, Naruto sat on the horse, but with his legs crossed and one hand on the reins. Hodor was confused by this since he never saw anyone sit on the horse in that manner and wondered why the masked man was even making the attempt without securing himself further. Hodor, said Hodor while Naruto looked at his confused face and understood what he wanted to ask the sage. Don't worry Hodor, I'm not most people so I don't ride horses like everyone else does. Besides, we'll be going at a slow pace with the escort of guards, answered Naruto with Hodor nodding. Hodor, said Hodor while nodding. Take care of the Starks while I'm away. Also, keep an eye out for anyone who should not be here. I know you know everyone here in Winterfell so if you see anyone who you don't know prowling around, they shouldn't be here, warned Naruto with Hodor's eyes going wide and he nodded quickly. Hodor, Hodor, exclaimed Hodor since he understood what the sage was asking of him. You're a good man Hodor. Stick close to Bran's room tonight and the following night too. While I trust the Stark guards, Bran's dire wolf, and Caitlyn to watch over Bran until he recovers, I would prefer another pair of eyes and strong arms protecting him should the unspeakable happen, said Naruto with Hodor nodding eagerly. Hodor, said Hodor while Naruto once more and wished his power could be used to help the one-worded mini-giant of a man. Sadly, even his own power had limits. At Hodor's age, the chakra placed into the man's body to fix the brain of its inability to say only one word would be rejected. Hodor's body would not only reject the chakra, but it would be as if the man had injected snake venom into his brain, and caused the poor mini-giant terrible pain until death finally decided to end it. Also, if someone does try to hurt Bran, you need to ensure he is captured, and kept alive for questioning. Under no circumstances is the assassin to be killed when caught. Do you understand? Whispered Naruto with Hodor nodding that he did though part of him was still confused on why such an attacker would be kept alive. Nonetheless, Hodor knew his place in the world, and would obey the sage's command to protect the Stark family which had been so good to him since he was brought into their service. Hodor, Hodor, exclaimed Hodor while nodding his head. Satisfied with the mini-giant of a man's response and understanding, Naruto commanded his horse to move to join the now larger escort of the king back to King's Landing. The men around him looked at him like he was riding his horse incorrectly and wondered why a strange man like the infamous demon sage was doing following their escort. Robert had made it perfectly clear following the end of his rebellion against the Mad King that he disliked the sage immensely due to word getting out about how the masked man had helped the Mad King's children escape Dragonstone by a single ship when being hunted by Stannis's fleet of ships during the end of the rebellion. Some had called for the demon sage's head for his act of treason, but Robert knew better, and Ned had argued that it was senseless to kill innocent children. Still, if their king wasn't going to order his death, none here were going to try. So this is where we part. For now anyway, commented Jon while he saw Tyrion and some men moving in front of him toward the direction where the wall was located. Aye, but it's only temporary. We'll see each other again. Whether it's in Winterfell or on the wall. Starks have defended the wall for thousands of years. Your Benjen did it after I returned from Robert's rebellion. Whether you choose to do so as well is your choice. I won't force anything on you. Get a feel for the Night's Watch. See if it's something you know is right for you. Whatever your decision, I will support it with all my power, said Ned with Jon smiling at him and looked around to see if anyone was within hearing distance of their conversation. There was none. Uncle, I just want to say, thank you. For everything. For raising me. Loving me as your own son, said Jon with Ned smiling lovingly at his nephew even if he couldn't call the young man that. You are a Stark, both in name and in blood. I only wish Caitlyn had warmed up to you sooner. I couldn't tell her truth because I feared what people would think if her reaction to you shifted from disgust to one of love. I feared Robert's wrath and it being aimed at you. An innocent child should not have to face such things, said Ned with Jon nodding, but he still smiled all the same. She's been like a mother to me since learning the truth. I understand her frustrations and won't hold it against her. I'm proud to be a Stark and officially called your son by both of you, said Jon with Ned smiling more now knowing his wife's promise and contract with the gods had been fulfilled completely with those words spoken. His house and that of House Tully were saved from wrath sent forth by divine powers he could not begin to battle. We'll talk more about other things in the future. Namely more about my sister, said Ned with Jon nodding and soon the younger man rode to follow the group heading up for the wall. So, did you say what needed to be said? Asked Naruto when Ned caught up to him. Aye, and more. I have you to thank for that, replied Ned with a sense of joy in his voice that Naruto easily picked up on. I do what I can, commented Naruto while they followed the royal escort with King Robert in the lead with their path for King's Landing out in front.